welcome to the adventures of LBZ. I am the host, Lance Collins, and if you're new to my channel, please consider hitting the subscribe button. Also, if you like this video, please hit the like button. In today's video, a day in the life of a technician at a Honda dealership. I'm working on a 2003 Honda GL 1800. This one has ABS, and in this one I'm doing an oil change. I just did the rear tire and I forgot to turn the GoPro on, but you'll get to watch the front tire removal. And as I'm removing the front, I have to take the brakes off, so I did a brake inspection and it needs pads, so I end up putting front pads on this one also. And if you're new to any of these videos that I do at my work, I do not play the background music. I usually do some kind of a voiceover, whether it be a whole voiceover or just bits and pieces here and there. There's way too much, different radios going in the background, and for people's privacy, I don't want, they don't want to be on the internet. So I respect that, so I can keep doing these videos. Also, I don't really change any camera angles. Just wearing a head mount with my GoPro. That way you see the job exactly how I'm doing it and what I'm seeing. Also, I'm on their time, so I don't have time to be setting up cameras, and that's, cutting into company time. So if I can throw a head mount on real quick and just let it eat, and that's how it's got to be. Okay, if you're tuning into this video just to kind of see what goes on in this, what I've already done is I've removed the two Allens, they're 5mm, that hold the front part of the fender on. And then you have the rotor covers, and there are two, I believe there's two Allens on the back side of that hold that in, because the other Allens run through the fender and into the front piece to hold it all together. It's like a clamshell. So I removed that. Then on the rotor that you're seeing here that I'm removing the caliper on right now, there's a there's a 5mm, and then I can't remember the torque size, but there's a Torx on the bottom one. Different bolts, so you'll need a Torx kit and a Allen kit if you're going to be doing this front thing, along with a I believe your other caliper bolts were 12mm on the side that I was just on. Might be asking yourself, why is he pulling the axle out with what looks like a hook tool, which is a tool that's actually a hose tool to get up underneath the hose and like hose clamps. But the axle was kind of seized into the front there, just had some corrosion and stuff on it, and it didn't want to come out of the fork there, so that makes it a little easier. As you can see, it does have, like, actually it had any seize or something on it there, and it still was seized in there. No. And now that I've removed the front wheel, I'm going to lay the spacers that come out on the sides that they came out on the wheel, so that I don't get them confused. Also, I mark the rotor. I know there's little arrows on there, but I usually mark it even though it has the arrows on there, because sometimes people put them on backwards and they put the tire on backwards, and that's the way I'm putting it back on. Since it's the customers, I would let them know if there was something wrong, but sometimes people do some weird things and they want you to put it back how it was, so I mark it just how it was. Now I'm cleaning up those spacers, because if people don't know that those spacers hold dirt and grime and stuff, and then it ends up tearing up the seal, which lets moisture in, seizes the axle and or the bearings. Usually the bearings start going bad because you're grinding dirt into the bearings past the seal at that point. And after I cleaned them, I checked to make sure that there was no grooves in them, because that's going to continue to let dirt pass there, because the seal is designed to ride on that at a certain clearance, and if it's had dirt and it's grooved it out, then it's changed that clearance, and now it's allowing moisture and dirt and stuff to go through there. And I'm going to go ahead and break the tire down on the machine. I usually take the tire, put it on the tire machine. I break it down easily. I've kind of sped this part up there because it's a little boring, but getting the machine set up per se. But so what I've done is I broke both sides down all the way around the bead on both sides, and then I've taken that, put it on the machine, and now I'm pushing the bead down just a little further so it drops down to the very center. And I'll take one side, push it down to hold the drop center down, and then put the other tire tool into the other side and hit the button that makes it spin and pop the bead off. And do the same with the bottom bead below it. I'll reach down there with the tire tool, bump up, let it eat, zip it off there. This one has a factory 90-degree valve stem. I don't remember if I changed. I think I did change, put brand new factory OEM valve stems in there. And it also has a little plastic tab that keeps it so that keeps your 90-degree valve stem from breaking off when people stick the air chuck on there, because they like to press too hard and push it backwards and it rips the valve stem. So the little plastic piece keeps it from doing that. That tool there I screwed on to the valve stem, and with a little bit of silicone spray on the back side, I pulled the valve stem through. And I also put the little plastic clip back on. Now I'm putting the tire on, making sure that the arrow is going the correct direction and that my yellow dot is lined up with my valve stem, because usually, unless it has a really bad rim, you put the tire right back to where the valve stem is, and if it has tire weights on it, you can check it on the tire machine, and it's usually within balance. You usually don't really have to change the weights on them. So I'll usually keep the weights on there that the customer left and check it on the balancer, which I'm doing now. And if it doesn't need them, then they don't have to get charged for new weights. Also, when I'm balancing wheels, I tighten it down and I spin it and check the wheel bearings, make sure that it's not, the wheel bearings are locked up. If the wheel bearings are bad, it'll usually spin those plastic clamp arms down that are around the tire, and that'll let you know that the wheel bearing's bad and you need to replace them. And like I say, with this one here, it had some weights on it, and what I did was actually took these weights off and rebalanced it there. And as you can see, since I took those off of there, it didn't even need the weights, and I didn't have to charge them for anything extra. Now I'll go ahead and install the wheel back on the correct way with the arrows pointing the correct direction, and also putting the spacers on the correct sides, making sure that the calipers do not scuff the wheel. You got to kind of work them sideways. There's not a whole lot of room in between the rotor and the wheel, so it's a little bit of a trick, but you can do it without scratching the wheel. And as all of my axles, I put the Honda rust penetrant lube on them. I don't use the anti-seize because, like I've said before, it's kind of gauds up on the ends where your spacers go, and then dirt collects there and it grinds the seal away, defeating the purpose of the seals, and it tears the bearings and stuff up. So I just spray the penetrant on there. It stays on the inside. Most of it's going to get pushed away anyways, and I kind of hit the rotors and brakes with some brake clean at the end there, and anything that was left over on the outside, it sprays away. As always, I just run the bolt down till it stops with my little impact gun. I don't hammer it home. Then I get my torque wrench out, set it to the proper spec, which was, let's see, 45 foot-pounds on this front axle bolt, and I'll torque that. As you can see, it's still moved, so my impact did not go all the way down on it, and it didn't get 50 Uggs or whatever you want to do. Then what I'll do is I'll go through and the little pinch bolts for the axle there, I'll go ahead and torque those, which I'm looking up now. And let's see, they are, I think, 10 mils on the pinch bolts. And like the center axle bolt, I just run them down till they stop. I don't hammer on those. Those will strip out if you use an impact on them. So. And time to set the torque wrench for the pinch bolts. As you'll see, you should be able to see what it is. I think it was 15 foot-pounds on those. And with these, you'll want to kind of go back and forth on them a couple times because as you'll see that when you go from one to the other, it kind of pulls the other one down. And then once I usually do it about 3 times and it doesn't move, I go ahead and move to the other side and repeat that process. And she's ready to go, ready to put the calipers back on and the front fender. I was also doing an oil change and filter change. So before I put the front fender back on, I went ahead and got the 17mm out and cracked the drain bolts for the engine oil, and I'm going to let it drain. And I just pulled the drain plug washer off there. It is important to change those out every time. I know some people will tell you to do it every other time, but what that does is that washer actually smashes down and prevents that steel bolt from pulling threads out of the aluminum case. It's not a sealing washer, it is a crush washer to stop you from pulling threads out. So if you smash it down and it's ballooned over the edge of the bolt, you are over torquing it. They are only, I believe, most Hondas are 18 foot-pounds and some of them are 22, depending on what it is. I believe this one is 22 on this particular model. And now I'm going to go ahead and remove the filter. I'm using one of the Honda tools that we have in our, I guess, tech area toolbox in the back there. I don't have a part number. I can always get one if you want one, but it's pretty nice. It's a lot sturdier than the ones you buy aftermarket. It's a little more heavy duty. And the tool I'm using now is not a screwdriver. It is a purpose-built brake pad spreading tool. It doesn't have any like sharp edges. And it allows it to have a lot more contact surface so that if you are spreading the brake pads or, you know, the piston out, you're not damaging anything. Now it's time to remove the front brake pads, and what I'm using is a 6 mil Allen, and I'll break it loose by hand first before you hammer it with anything. You don't really want to impact these out because they strip pretty easy, and they can be tough sometimes to get out of the caliper if you strip them. So I'm using the 6 mil on it, and I'll walk it out until the brake pads fall right out. It's actually really easy on these Goldwings to change the pads. You pull the caliper out from the wheel like they are, and then there's a little rubber cap over top of that 6 mil Allen, and pull it out of the way, put the 6 mil in, crack it loose, back the bolt out, and the brake pads will fall. Check your springs, make sure they aren't damaged up in the wheel there, which I'm actually spraying out now with some brake contact cleaner. I usually go ahead and hose this down really good. It probably look a little excessive, but I'm just making sure everything's out of there. Last thing I want to do is leave the dealership and still have some nasty stuff up in there. So I'll use some compressed air and blow dry everything out on that side, and repeat the process on this side over here. And now I'll put the new crush washer on, part number 94109-14000, and I'll hand tighten it down, and then I'll grab my torque wrench out, set it to 18 foot-pounds, torque it, and also I will hand tighten a oil filter on, which is the factory oil filter. And I don't torque those. I just put them on hand tight and then go about another quarter turn. Once it's already stopped, I'll quarter turn it. You don't have to kill the oil filters on there. The only thing you really got to make sure is that the surface that the O-ring on the new filter is meeting is it's clean and does not have the old O-ring stuck to it. Yes, I did go back because whenever I looked at my torque sheet, it was actually 25 foot-pounds on the Goldwing. I think I said it was going to be 18 or 22 earlier, but it's actually 25 on this particular one for an 03 GL 1800 Limited. What I'm doing here is getting some Scotch-Brite out. If the pins aren't pitted or grooved or anything, I'll get the Scotch-Brite out, and I'll clean the pin down and make sure there's no corrosion or anything on it. Take some brake clean and spray off whenever I'm done with that, making sure you don't damage the O-ring that's on the end. I usually try to stay away from the end with the Scotch-Brite. As you can see, my finger tip is where the pressure is, so I kind of go back to almost the O-ring, and then I'll go back the other way on it, and then spray it off over my drain pan, and repeat the process for the other side. And I'm actually using this is like a brake pin or brake slide grease. Yeah, you can pick this stuff up too. I have a big bulk container of it there, as you can see, but you can pick this stuff up. That's the stuff whenever you're buying brakes for your car or motorcycle. They have the little packs up at the counter. It's kind of like an anti-seize, but it's like not flammable, and also it's not as messy as like an anti-seize. You don't have it on your ear as soon as you look at opening the container. And we'll go ahead and slide the brake pads up in there, making sure that they are both going the proper direction and are seated into the spring up top. Then you'll slide the bottoms in and put the pin through. There's a hole, as you can see on the old brake pad on the lift there. It goes through both. There's a hole in both pads, and you'll put the pin through the hole on the side of the caliper and through the brake pads, and then it'll go into the other side of the caliper. And use your 5mm, or no, it's a 6mm Allen, I believe, on that one. I can't remember, 5 or 6 mil, one of the two, and you'll tighten it back down. I use my little ratchet there. I put it down just till it seats, and I'll go back and snug it up with my torque wrench when I'm all done there. Next thing I'll do is put the little rubber plug in, as you just saw. I'll repeat the same process on the other side, and I'll also put the brake caliper pin bolts in. As you see now, I'm using red Loctite on those bolts, and after I install them, I'll go ahead and hand tighten them down, and then I'll go back with my torque wrench. I don't get to show any of that footage in here on the torquing of the bolts on the front there. I had some people walk into frame, so I had to cut it out, but I'm just letting you know what I did. Okay, I lied. It showed some of the bolts getting torqued, but not all of them. Like I said, I had to cut some of the stuff out. And as you can see, this one was extremely tight, so what I ended up doing was putting it back on with the 2 brake pins loosely, and then I put my Allen back in there and got the bolt to crack loose and backed it out, pulled the pins out, put the new pads in, put the pin back in after I cleaned it off with the Scotch-Brite, and put some of the brake pin lube on there, and torqued it all back down. And as you'll see is I'll make sure all my tools are gathered up. Getting close to the end of this job, so just making sure everything is back where it's supposed to be. I'm going to put a little bit of some grease there on that O-ring. Some people say you shouldn't, but I do. It helps the next person that is changing that oil filter get the oil filter off, because sometimes the oil filter will, or the O-ring on the oil filter will get stuck to the side of the engine and cause some problems. So I usually put a little grease on there or some oil. Some people dip it in the oil, and yeah, keeps it from sticking to the block. And that is that fancy Honda tool. I'm going to go ahead and put it back into the Honda cabinet where it's supposed to go, and clean the hands off and put the new filter on and tighten it down. And now that the brake calipers are on and the front wheel is all torqued, all the bolts are torqued, I can go ahead and start putting the front fender and the side pieces to the front fender on. They are held on by two 5mm Allen bolts, and you want to make sure that you hand tighten these down. If you are going to use a ratchet of some sort, you do not want to seat the bolt all the way down tight. You just want to let it run slowly till it stops. Don't crank on it, because you will break the back part of the front fender. And I was having some problems with the bottom nut on that there, so I took it back off and just cleaned the threads out with some brake clean. There was some dirt and grime and stuff in there. Just didn't feel right when I was trying to start the bolt in there to run it down. So went in and cleaned them out, and went ahead and ran them back in by hand with a ratchet instead of the electric 14.4. But you can also use that. But like I said, if you're going to use those, make sure you go easy and do not let it, hammer it home on it, because you'll break the plastic fender. It's literally like a nut on the back side of the plastic there. So if you tighten it down, it smushes into the plastic and breaks it. So you don't want to do that. You got to be gentle. And time to put the front part of the front fender on. It is held on by two Allens, as you can see on the side. They are, one is longer than the other on these. So I believe the shorter one's on the bottom, the longer one is on the top. And I believe the bottom one also has a rubber grommet that goes on it with it. So when you're putting it back together, make sure you get that correct on putting it back together. And they're 5mm Allens. I just tighten them, down snug by hand. I don't usually use a torque on them. Now I'll go ahead and lube up the kickstand using a little bit of the Honda rust penetrant lube, and that usually makes that thing move freely. Also the center stand there, I go ahead and hit the pivot points on it and the spring points. Like say, if you got some kind of squeak there when you're putting your stands down, you just hit right around where the spring goes, and that helps that out. And also, like I say, the side stand makes it really easy to get it to move. Go ahead and put the oil into this machine. And just for a recap, what I did on this was I did an oil and filter change, put a new crush washer on the bottom. What you didn't see was I also did a rear tire, and you set the rear tire pressure to 42 psi. I mounted and balanced a new front tire, set it to 36 psi, and put some new front brake pads on there. And then I'll take a little tiny test drive at the end. I think it was raining outside, so I had to stay in the back shop. But you get like a brief second there of, it driving through the shop. Nothing impressive. Didn't go for any kind of road test or nothing, so don't get your hopes up. And that's going to be it for today's video. If you're new to this channel, please consider hitting the subscribe button. Also, if you like this video, please make sure you hit the like button. And as always, thanks and have a great day.